2023 versus 2019, you'll see that the RPKs are minus 2.6. There's a number of reasons for that. Okay, the industry is -1. That means that for revenue passenger kilometers, Africa performed lower than they did in 2019. Okay, which is unfortunate. But the good news is on cargo, they are actually higher than anybody else in the globe, and they're doing excellent. We're assuming that these RPKs, we're forecasting that these RPKs will be on par in 2024. When you look at the green bands here, you can see that the load factors for 2023 is actually higher than it was in 2019. Also, for a number of reasons, the capacity is reduced, and there is a demand to travel. Okay, so that's a positive, very positive outcome. When you look at the whole industry this year, it still hasn't hit the 2019 numbers. So Africa's outperforming when it comes to load factor globally. Moving on, and this is a very difficult chart to see, but if you focus on the orange, let's say orange line, you'll see that the connectivity in Africa has improved this year to above where it was in 2019 by about 4%, which is great. The connectivity means internationally and locally, by the way, so it's not just locally, okay? But the air connectivity has improved from 2019 numbers, which is great. When we look at the ticket sales, it's hard to look at this chart, okay? So you have international flights and you have domestic flights. There are a number of countries in Africa that have domestic flights. And overall, and to make it simple, this is where we expect the numbers to be right now, okay? So it's very difficult, and you can see it's in many cases seasonal. So if we had December's numbers, you would see it'll peak because of Christmas and so on. But it's in par of where we're expecting it to be. Passenger traffic, if you focus just on Africa here, and we divided it by years, so 22, 23, 24, and 25. So 22 was at 88% of 2019 numbers. 23, it is at 101, so we're closing at 101% of 2019 numbers, and we can see the growth immediately by 4% in 2024, which is a forecast that will be around 105%, and then at 25, we're expecting it to be 113% passenger traffic in comparison to 2019. Industry financials, so you know, globally, we all remember 2020, globally, the industry lost $140 billion. That's a huge amount. And if you want to measure how resilient this industry is, you know, we're looking at 3 years later and we're at $23.3 billion positive. That's excellent. That is a good result. We're expecting a forecast of, and for 2024 at $25.7 billion profits. So that's a marginal growth, but a positive growth nevertheless. Moving forward, if we look at the regional financial performance, okay, it's still a bit mixed. And if we just zoom into Africa, you'll see that it was negative from 21, 22, and just not breaking even at about 400 million at 23. And this is estimated because we haven't closed the year yet. And we know that it's going to be positive in 2024. We can forecast that now. It's not going to be massive profits, but at least it's positive. So the airline starts generating some revenue. So this is a very dense slide, and I just want to point out a few things because I'm sure Catherine will give you printouts of all this. If you look at the African airlines, so we're expecting 2019, it was of course loss. And as you keep on going to 2024, that loss will be marginalized to almost nothing. The RPKs will be improving, and it is what it is, but it's definitely improving right now. And we're looking at 7.3% growth, hopefully forecasted for 2024. Okay, so what is IATA doing for Africa? IATA is still very focused on Africa, and you may all remember in June of this year we launched the Focus Africa initiative, and I just wanted to brief everybody in it. Okay, so move on here. Now, as you know, that Focus Africa was divided into 6 primary columns, okay? And these are, we call them priority areas, but they're basically columns. So we have safety, infrastructure, connectivity, finance and distribution, sustainability, and future skills. And again, this was driven 2 years ago, and very, IATA was very engaged in identifying the key areas that will improve the aviation industry in Africa from all the areas. Of course, it's there are a number of issues to be tackled, and it's a big continent. So we have to segment how we approach all these initiatives. So if we take safety, you have the overall safety that needs to be improved, and once you improve the safety, then you automatically start improving the efficiency of the aviation industry. And safety is focused on the aircraft, but also on the runways and the tarmacs and the airspace and the airports and across the aviation industry. Infrastructure, of course, plays a very important role, and this is infrastructure, whether it is from the airspace point of view or from the actual airports, ins and outs, cargo facilities, and so on and so forth. So that's part of our initiative. Connectivity, which is the part that we're trying to align with AFCAC and AFRA on. As you know, the African Union has assigned the single air traffic transport market to AFCAC to handle. AFCAC is taking the approach for the bilaterals. We want to make sure that the level of all the elements in each of the countries, the SATM states, are level before AFCAC does this. So we're fully engaged right now. The financial distribution system is basically we're pushing the states to implement, and the airline to implement, a more secure and effective, cost-efficient financial service and adopt a more modern retailing standards. That means airlines get their money quicker. It's safer between all the entities, including travel agents and so on, and handling the airlines' money and vice versa. Sustainability we'll go into in a minute, okay? But it's no secret, of course, IATA has been advocating for net zero by 2050. There's a lot that IATA is doing in the background, whether it's advocating with governments and airlines, manufacturers, ANSPs, and so on and so forth, to try to achieve this, and we'll discuss this in a minute. And of course, future skills, and this is the part that we're very passionate about. There's about 1/7 of planet Earth is in Africa. The youngest youth is in Africa. There's a lot of potential and human skills in Africa, and we are going to take with our partners and stakeholders a lot of effort to develop this youth for the aviation industry. So moving on, if I can move on, there you go. So I don't know if you can see. Yes, you can see the chart. Unfortunately, Africa remains the worst when it comes to aviation safety. We've done a lot over the years, and there's still a lot to be done. This requires engagement by IATA with a lot of partners, and then engaging with the stakeholders in Africa to move towards a safer aviation industry. This is our priority. We'll keep focusing on it. It is an improvement from last year, but it's still not good enough, and we will not stop until we get it to the standard that the rest of the world is at the moment. And Focus Africa is focused on this very heavily. So when we look at one of the benefits of IATA is the IOSA, which is the IATA Operational Safety Audit. you can see immediately by looking at this chart that once you can see the effect, the positive effect on safety once the industry adopts the AOSA standard to become AOSA certified, and we remain heavy in pushing the airlines to join the AOSA program because of the clear benefits of having AOSA. And you can see just by comparing the AOSA numbers with the non-AOSA numbers, and you can see that the huge difference, up to 5 or 6 times safer once you are an AOSA airline. Go on. All right, so one of the bigger projects that we launched in October, I believe, is the CASP. This is one of the safety programs that are under the Focus Africa, okay? And of course, you know, we tend to, Focus Africa only works when it's a collaborative effort. That means that a number of entities have to work together to achieve CASP, and it was triggered off, as I said, in October, and it was very successful. The objective, of course, is to first increase the collaboration at continent level to enhance safety, promote safety leadership and safety culture, deliver safety training workshops, promote an adoption of industry recognized best practices, and so on and so forth, including the state safety program, which will be a separate project, and we're hoping to launch it by the end of January 2024. The CASP is already launched. It's very active. We have 3 dedicated people just in the AMI office, plus all the technical support from Geneva and Montreal supporting this. We have a number of major external stakeholders: Boeing, Airbus, Flight Safety, ASA, the World Food Program, FAA in the USA, EASA, IFALPA, CANZO, and AFRA, all participating in this. And the first meeting, the Boeing rep was elected as a chair of the CASP, okay, and this is the first positive step. They have a big agenda already, and they're working on a number of initiatives. Some of the streams to simplify what CASP does, we're looking at 3 predominant streams inside CASP. The first one is operational safety, and that's all of the operational safety. And of course, you can't have operational safety without having the training, capacity building, and improvement monitoring programs embedded, which is the second stream. And then we have the SIRM in Africa, which is the third stream. If you look at how it's set up, the SIRM, so it will address the issues in transparency, complete transparency in Africa, looking at RVSM and large height deviation, LHDs, flight procedures, and maybe the redesign function of that, the cabin operations, aeronautical information, and wildlife and ground operations. And ground operations, we also have separate initiatives on that, whether it's for safety or security, which will be feeding into the CASP. Moving on, I want to talk about the net zero. So you can see that the aviation industry and IATA in the forefront have approved and will be targeting to try to achieve net zero by 2050. Okay. So this target aligns with the Paris Agreement to keep the global warming under 1.5 degrees. It is trying to, although aviation is only 2% of the CO2 being produced yearly, aviation's taken the lead, and probably the only industry has taken the lead in trying to tackle this. But we have to be transparent that this is not just the airlines. You know, you need to look at the airline, the manufacturing of sustainable aviation fuel. You need to look at how airports are managed. You need to look at the technology applied to aircraft and so on and so forth. But the airline industry is taking the lead and trying to achieve net zero by 2050. Sustainability. So if you look, IATA wants to ensure that in the Focus Africa project, assist African air transport industry to achieve net zero by 2050. It's going to be tough with all the obstacles that the aviation industry in Africa faces. But I mean, we've already started engaging with them the last quarter of this year. And of course, we will trigger off a number of events with ICAO in 2024. So sustainability, Rwanda Air has joined our Eco Hub. ANVA, Airlink, and South African Airways have joined the South Airline Readiness Workshop, which was done by us in October in Joburg, but it was in the collaboration with ASA, and I have to thank ASA because they have been excellent with IATA on this, and very supportive and very engaged with the airlines. And of course, we had a big team in Dubai recently for the CAF3, working with the airlines and the governments and trying to hash out the best way to move forward to 2050. So discussing the financial distributions part of Focus Africa, actually our teams are already engaged. They've been engaged pretty much all of 2023, even before the launch of Focus Africa. And we want to implement a secure and effective, cost-efficient financial service and adoption of modern retailing standards, which helps the aviation industry grow and it becomes less risky. You can see by these two charts how much we have moved forward and our new targets for 2024 and beyond. So our goal is effectively by the end of this Focus Africa, that map will be completely blue, okay? And we're working diligently to achieve that. Blocked funds, my favorite subject. So I'll pause just for a second so you can see the numbers before I start talking, okay? So now the blocked funds is total, I believe, if I can remember correctly, I think $2.3 billion. About 1/3 of that is in Nigeria. It's 792 million as of October, expected to grow in November, okay, and expected to close in the end of the year at an exceedingly high number. It's followed closely by Egypt, which is half of that, which is about 348 million. And then you have Algeria. It's not exactly blocked with Algeria, it's just really slow. Then you have the ZAF zones of 183 and Ethiopia of 128. So these are the top 5 blocked funds. And I've repeated this for the last 2 years. When a country blocks funds to the airline serving that country, it damages the airline industry. It also damages the revenue being produced by the Nigerian aviation industry. Nigeria happens to have the 2 most expensive airports to operate to, which is Lagos and Abuja. Almost double and a half than the GCC airports. The airport itself doesn't give that much. It doesn't give that high quality of services to the passengers or the airlines. Yet they charge humongous amounts of money to operate to and from those airports. These are all charged in hard currency. They're willing to reap the benefits of the taxes and charges in Nigeria for the aviation industry, but they're not willing to give the airlines their due. This will, I mean, it's getting to a breaking point for Nigeria where airlines will start dropping off and not operating to Nigeria, which will then mean that their source of hard currency when it comes for aviation will also start reducing, and it becomes a vicious cycle. I've spoke about this so many times, and I would like Nigeria to take the issue very seriously. I think it's affecting, a lot of African airlines, where African airlines now have blocked funds and are suffering and don't have the cash to expand or to pay some of their bills because of the large amount of money blocked in Nigeria. And I would like to see the Nigerian government taking some very positive steps forwards where they reassess where they're spending their dollars and prioritize aviation first, and specifically paying the bills in Nigeria. So that's pretty much it. And I open the floor, managed by Catherine, to any questions.
Perfect. So let's start in the room. Any questions? Let's start with.
Yes.
Yep. Karen?
Yes, hello, this is Karen Smith. I'm representing Business Day from South Africa. And I would like to ask you about what does AFI stand for? Sorry, I didn't quite get it off the...
Africa.
Oh, okay.
Africa, Indian Ocean.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I just want to ask you about the calculations that you quoted for the safety numbers in Africa. It's done losses per million flights, if I understood it correctly. But if one looks at absolute numbers, would you actually then find that there are more accidents and incidents in Africa compared to other regions? So, you know, could this kind of calculation that's being used, could it be skewing the picture perhaps? And, you know, to what extent could that negatively then affect airlines, for instance, by driving insurance premiums up? Do you have any context on that?
Yeah, so it's actually quite a good question. Averagely, if there's 7 more accidents and events and accidents and so on in Africa than anywhere else in the world. Okay, so it doesn't skew the insurance. That's actually reality. Okay, so the events and the accidents and the insurance claims are 7 times higher. Okay. It depends on how you classify the accidents, but we are generalizing because, you know, you don't want to, we'll spend a whole week on the safety brief on just the accidents and the events and the type of the events and so on and so forth. But in general, I would say there are 7 times more events in Africa than there is on, you know, in the rest of the globe.
We actually have our head of safety on the line as well. Sharon, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, we do have now, for the first time, an interactive annual safety report, which is available on IATA.org. So you can drill down to the number of accidents by region of operator, and you can also drill down to the number of accidents by region of occurrence. So if you take a look, they give you the graphs, so you can actually see the performance this year against last, and also going back in time. It also provides the end state, whether there were fatal accidents or not, and also you can see the performance of our region against the performance of the other regions. All the information is there and available should you require it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Sharon. Do we have any questions online? We'll take an online question, either in the chat or if you want to raise your hand. Guy?
Yeah, hi, Catherine.
Hi.
The connectivity in the single African air transport market has traditionally been a very hot subject. It's been relatively downplayed in Kamil's report this time.
Downplayed as a negative thing, you mean, or you're just not happy about how much information I gave?
You did mention it.
Yeah, no, of course you mentioned it, but it hasn't, I'm not seeing it as the focus that it used to be.
Yeah. Okay, so I will give you a very transparent answer, Guy. The issue of SATM itself is quite complicated, and the approaches might differ from different entities. For me, at this particular moment, you have to remember that I have actually asked airlines to tell me if they have a commercial viable connectivity route within Africa that they are not able to operate to because of bilaterals or restrictions, to let me know, and I will assist them in opening up these routes. So yet I've had like 2 or 3 requests. The point I'm trying to make is it is at this stage, in my opinion, a little too early to talk about the connectivity and SATM as an end state until we sort out some of the ground rules and try to level the playing field. Okay. However, should airlines feel it necessary to operate a route which is commercially viable and being blocked by a state or another airline, very willing to tackle that on its own. But I don't think at this particular moment that the African region has the extra capacity and equipment, or it's commercially viable to jump into this to start discussing the end state while there's a lot of groundwork to be done. I hope that answers your question in a very diplomatic way, Guy.
No, thank you, Kamil. Yes.
Thomas, you have
Yes.
something to add here?
Yeah, I think Kamil explained what it is, but we have to be remembered, actually, liberalization is a process, right? And it's not a magic word and it will happen within a couple of years or a couple of weeks. It will take long. And the first thing that we have to be remembered is the propensity to fly or propensity to travel in Africa, which is among the lowest in the world. So, and the second point is the cost of operation is actually the highest. Fuel, for example, which accounts for 20 to 25% of cost of operations, is actually 40% in Africa. So we have a problem with the propensity, that is the guy who can't buy a ticket, and on the other hand, we have the guy operating at a very high cost. So, and thirdly, there are so many other items that Kamil mentioned, and the number one is safety. And you have, on the other political side, you have 54 countries having different legislation, different civil aviation, different culture in the aviation industry. So we have to work on the harmonization, and harmonization for 54 countries takes long. So it will happen, but we have to be remembered of those challenges, and we are working on it. So the way we work on it is to actually try to reduce the cost on the operators so that they can offer competitive ticket price for the local population to travel. So these are the different elements we are working on. But if we have to talk about it, will take probably another couple of hours. But I hope this is sufficient for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. And Thomas, if you haven't met Thomas yet, I'm sure you're familiar with him, but Thomas is the Regional Director of External Affairs and Sustainability, IATA, formerly CEO of Air Mauritius. So we'll go back and take another question in the room now. Yep.
Hi, Kamil. Keith Monalisi from Times Aerospace. With regards to Focus Africa, have you experienced any unexpected challenges so far?
Oh, that's a very political question. It's a challenge by itself. I mean, it is an ambitious project, okay, which involves many stakeholders, and it's the first time that it's being approached this way, rather than have support, let's say, from an entity like FAA just for one state, and then FAA leaves. We put all these massive stakeholders together, including Airbus, Boeing, and a couple of other manufacturers, and so on and so forth. Everybody in the same table, and we've highlighted the important issues that we want to work with. Initially, it was very hard to get. So the airlines are very interested in this and very pro Focus Africa. Initially, it was hard to get the civil aviation entities within Africa to jump on board. But we're at the place now where we can launch, sufficient projects with sufficient states in a harmonized manner together. So I think these obstacles. I mean, you have to be patient and chip away at these obstacles one by one. But no, I think if you look at how successful the CASAP was in October, and it's an ongoing event. It's not an event that just occurs in October and is shut down. It is now part of IATA's objectives that we're working all the safety information coming into CASAP and improving it. And that's just one. We have the SSP State Safety Program coming up for 16 states in Africa in January, and so on and so forth. So yeah, there were a lot of obstacles. Patience and determination and the support of the aviation industry has actually knocked these obstacles down.
Thanks, Kamil. We'll take a question online, Groom. You're muted. Okay, well, we're waiting on Groom. Edgar? Hi.
Hi, thank you for making some time available for us. I want to just talk to you about the profitability of African airlines. You mentioned the challenges such as the high tax rates, the jet fuel, et cetera, et cetera. When can we expect African airlines to start making a profit? And how long can they continue making losses and still operating?
All right, so that's a good question, Edgar, and I'm just going to pick on one country, okay? To answer the question, and you know, every country, every airline has its challenges depending on where it's located and where it operates to, okay? But I'll just answer this question just using Nigeria as an example. So Nigeria has the two most expensive airports. Their fuel is 10-15% higher than anywhere else in the world, okay? The insurance is, I calculated as 6 times more expensive for that type of equipment than anywhere else in the world. The interest on loans are at 25%, 30%, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's, you know, it's the highest interest I've ever seen in Nigeria. So you set up this airline and you are already at the disadvantage. Any airline outside Nigeria operating in and out of Nigeria has a cheaper operating cost and cheaper fixed costs than the Nigerian airline. Now you apply that same model across Africa at various levels, okay, and then you can see why it is really hard for airlines in Africa to make money. They start off at a disadvantage, okay. Now, folks, Africa addresses the core reasons. So Thomas and I and the team here specifically try to identify the reasons these costs are high, and we intend to tackle them one by one with initiatives. So when you tackle initiative, then you hopefully can reduce the cost of these that's added, the charges, the fees, the taxes, and so on and so forth. If we can achieve that, then we're expecting that the fixed and operating costs for the African airlines will be lowered, and they can jump into profitability. Nevertheless, if you saw that the presentation I did, in 2024, they will be jumping into profitability, and that's a positive thing.
Sumas, something to add? You have your hand up.
Yes, I think to complete the answer from Kamil, we have to be remembered as well that we are talking about 115 million passenger global Africa, right? So which is 2% of the total traffic of the world. And looking at this 115 million, you will be you will note that 85% are international. That is outside the continent, and 15% are regional. So well, we just mentioned, we just talked about it, the high cost and the low propensity to spend, right? So when we are talking about that 85% of international traffic, we have to be remembered that when we talk about Lufthansa Group is 1,200 aircraft. When we talk about Africa, it's roughly about 400 aircraft in total, right, for the whole continent. So it's a question of economy of scale as well. So the cost is at the center of the question if you want to make profit, and the competitivity of those airlines. There is another thing which is quite political as well, is the management of those airlines. You will note as well that 60% of the airline in Africa are state-owned, are not private. So there is also some governance issues related to the management of the airlines on the continent. So what I said initially, the 85 to 15% of the traffic, 15% being only on the regional and domestic, there is a big opportunity for intra-African tourism. And this is why SATEM is also very important in that particular case for the African tourism. So that is intra-Africa tourism, to develop that traffic, but we have to tackle safety, capacity, and also the cost issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Just a quite small correction on the Africa making profit. It's not focused. Sorry, it's not forecast to make profit in 2024. It's still a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions? We'll go and then Dominic.
Yeah, well, Romuald News Cyro, Africa. Mr. Kamil, since we have been listening for years, we have been listening IATA speaking, and sometimes we hear you pointing and accusing finger at the state and police and the state and government. Do you feel listened by this government?
I'm sorry, I completely missed your question. I couldn't hear you clearly.
Was it on Nigeria?
No, globally, since IATA has been speaking, we hear you pointing and accusing finger on politics and government. Government bottlenecks. But do you feel when discussing with this government, how do you feel? Are they receiving your your remarks? Are they open for discussions? How is this tendency actually?
Yeah, so
All right,
how
so
open, Kamil, are governments for engagement when we speak to them about taxes, charges, block funds, etc.,
Yeah.
sustainability?
Yeah, in general, so not specific country here. We're just talking about governance and governments in general. It's not, I mean, there are governments that have supported their airline industry, and I don't mean by just giving cash. I mean, having a dialogue with their airline industry quite well, and you can see immediately. You look at some of the success. If you look at it's not by fluke that the UAE's aviation industry is booming. Okay, there are a number of airlines there, 5 airlines there, big airlines, all making profit. Okay. It's not by fluke. It doesn't just happen just like that. There's a very good relationship between the airline and the government and the stakeholders in the government. Okay, so it's not. I don't just go out of my way to point fingers at governments. That's not the intent. The intent is to advise governments. Okay, if they are. I mean, governments are not aviators in most cases, and don't have the experience when you put a Ministry of Transport or a Ministry of Aviation. He may not be an aviator in many cases, and so it's not. I'm not pointing fingers more than I'm trying to advise governments that the decisions that they may be taking is harming the aviation industry. And I can give you 100 examples of that. The intent is literally to protect the aviation industry, which then subsequently contributes to the GDP of that country.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we have time, guys. Vishwa?
Morning. My name is Shola, writes for Nigerian Tribune. Safety remains a journey and not a destination. How is IATA trying to use its various programs to advance these frontiers?
All right.
Did you hear that, Kamil? Yeah.
Yes, I heard it. Okay, so in general, the approach that IATA had in the past was to conduct workshops and advocate for airlines to take AOSA and for the ground handlings to take ISAGO and work with the civil aviations to identify weak spots and so on and so forth. But because of the nature of our approach and how complicated it is, there's no point of view fixing one country and the airline flying to the other country and having an accident. Okay, so it has to be collaboratively, and that's the approach that we're taking with Focus Africa. So we're taking a step back and looking at the core issues in more depth, the areas such as the regulatory requirements, the training of the inspectors, the workshops that need to highlight all the safety issues, CASIP, which then connects all of them together to discuss all these issues. The state safety program in the 16 states that we've already listed, and so on and so forth. So we're going from the bottom up again, okay, and going through all those phases. And this is not being done just by IATA. This is being done by many large partners that are partnering with us with years of experience. And so we're going to approach this in a collaborative manner.
Thanks, Kamil. We'll take a question online now. Kieran?
Hi all, my name is Kieran and I represent Travel News Weekly in South Africa. I'm a young journalist, and in terms of Focus Africa, one of the most interesting and important things to me is the Future Skills initiatives. I'd like to know what IATA is doing to improve future skills and include more young professionals in the industry, considering that a WTTC report earlier this year showed that professionals below the age of 27 only make up 15% of the African travel and tourism industry's workforce?
Yeah. All right, that's a really good question, Karen. So of course, the solution to this requires a lot of data. And at the right now, actually, the girl sitting to my left here is the lady that's crunching this data. She's crunching the data. So what it needs to, the plan is, I'm going to simplify it, but it's far more complicated than this. You first have to identify the growth of the aviation industry and where it's going to happen, whether it's in ASP, whether it's in airports, security, ground handling, all the little elements that make up the environment, the aviation environment. And that's the process that we're in right now. And then when we look at the opportunities in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and the next 15 years, these are the areas that we intend to focus on to develop these generations straight into the aviation industry. Of course, there's no point of us, for example, opening up wing design, training and there's no manufacturing in Africa, right? So you have to actually identify what the industry needs in the next 5, 10, and 15 years, and then start developing programs. The programs IATA has already, but we just have to identify where the resources need to be put for the need for the African aviation industry, and that's exactly where we're at right now. So I'm looking at maybe the end of Q1 2024. We have a rough idea where we want to start focusing the development of the future aviators.
Okay, I will take another question online, I think, and then come back to the room. Nelly?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Nelly Ferdes from John Afrique. And there is one thing that wasn't mentioned is human resources. I would like to know if there is a real issue on human resources across Africa, and if IATA and Focus Africa are working on it.
There is. I mean, this is what we were just discussing. So the sixth pillar in Focus Africa is identifying the next generation of aviators in Africa, and that's exactly what we're discussing. It's an important element in Focus Africa. We understand that the largest amount of youth in the world is in Africa. We understand that the largest potential is in Africa, and it's one of the 6 columns that we intend to focus on in Africa.
Great, thanks. We'll go. Let's do one question for everybody first. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm Wale Shadari. I work for New Telegraph, Nigeria. I'm actually bothered about Saturn, in the sense that it's almost ending up like the Yamoussoukro, the YD. And for 54 nations, only about 25, if I'm right, have signed the solemn declaration. Don't you see this as a big elephant project? Because for 4, 5, 6 years now, African countries have not been able to reach a conclusion on this. What is your view generally? Because if you also look at connectivity in Africa, is the worst. Because if you want to fly from Cape Verde to Lagos or to Congo, most times you even come to Europe before you do your connection. And this is looking so difficult and so frustrating. Won't you suggest that Africa should just focus on something else than Saturn, because it doesn't seem as if it is working? What is your view about this? I mean, when I say your view, I mean IATA's view. And how do you think Africa can really solve this problem of connectivity in the continent?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a good question. So you mentioned that a number of the states in Africa signed the YD declaration and SATM agreements and so on, and the bilaterals and the BASAs and so on and so forth. I would shy away from that as a measuring stick. I wouldn't look at the signatures right now as a measuring stick, because you really don't need to sign an agreement to allow people in and out of South Africa, for example. Okay. It is far more complicated than that, in my view. Okay, and maybe this is where we don't agree with AFCAC on the principle or the approach. Our approach is more in line with, first of all, looking at everything else. The visa issues, the security issues in the airport, the profitability. If there's a route between A and B that only 2 passengers fly, there's no point in getting hooked up about trying to open that route. Okay, there are issues on 3rd and 4th freedoms, and we're discussing 5th freedoms. So the issue is far more complicated than just signing a document. Okay, and this is where Focus Africa maybe differs on the approach than AFCAC. We want to actually level the playing field. We want to tackle the security requirements in each airport so this level. We want to make sure that the sharing of information between country A and country B on the passengers. We want to make sure that the security standards in the airports are identical, and so on and so forth. Once you do this, it becomes far easier to sign that document in the end.
Right. We have, yep.
Yes. Dominic from Vision Ghana here. Initially, you gave a very general answer to him, but I'm going to the specifics. I met a few months back, you said you engaged the Ethiopian government on the 128 million block funds in Ethiopia. Would you like to give us an update on what the Ethiopian government said about the block funds and how they're going to help Alliance to recover those funds?
Yeah, if I may add to his question, just recently, the Nigerian government came out to say they're already solving the issue of block fund. And the figure I saw was as at September, the data the slide. I don't think it's a recent figure. I just want to know if IATA has reconciled what government said it has paid. I know government hasn't given IATA all the monies that are blocked, but we just want to know, because it's getting more complicated and confusing now. How much was the Nigerian government able to give to airlines as part of the blocked funds?
And related to that, there's a new management at the CBN, and you probably mentioned the last time that you're planning to meet the new central bank leadership. I want to find out if you've done that.
All right. So the question started off with Ethiopia, ended up in Nigeria. Yes. Okay, so let's start with Ethiopia. Ethiopia have a different approach. So they're trying to settle their bills, and they're talking central bank to central bank. Okay. So for example, Ethiopia and another country will settle the block funds between each other. Okay. So that's quite a positive approach, even though it's still climbing up. Okay. But at least they took the initial approach to settle the blocked funds between country and country. Okay. So Ethiopia is proactively seeking a way to resolve this issue. All right. So in my briefing earlier on in the MENA region, I got asked a very similar question. The first step for us solving these block funds is engaging, with both parties engaging. If the parties don't engage, it is very difficult to move forwards. Okay. I have not been able to engage with the new CBN governor, okay, and he's not that new anymore. He's been there over 6 months, okay, and I did get a reply from him that he will only engage with me when he has a solution, okay. So that's not a promising message at all, okay. So this is one step, but I have engaged with the aviation minister who was very understanding, very new into the position, and maybe overwhelmed with the situation he inherited. Okay, and I was hoping, this was in September, I was hoping to move forward from that. Unfortunately, we didn't get very far after that. Okay, so when you're talking about the numbers, you're absolutely right. Okay, and I have to be careful what I say now. So the numbers you're looking at are dollar values. Okay, so I will pose a question and you guys sit there and calculate it. What was the Naira in January 2023 and compared to the dollar? And what's the Naira today compared to the dollar? Do the conversion yourself with a calculator, and then you can see what it was. So you look at the double whammy the airline suffers. The airline has, let's say, so I'm picking on one particular airline that I know is suffering from cash. It's owed 34 million today, $34 million by the Nigerian. It's blocked. $34 million. So this airline's struggling cash. It's not a Nigerian airline. It's an African airline, and it has $34 million blocked in Nigeria. Other than the $34 million, it was actually higher, but because of the depreciation, it's already lost $10 million because of that depreciation. That's not fair for the airline that has already paid all its dues to operate in and out of Nigeria. Every landing it pays in dollars. Okay, it's carried Nigerian passengers who paid their bills. Okay, it's even carried Nigerian government officials on these flights, and they can't get their money.
So we're running out of time, so I'll do one question online, and then Kamil, I don't know if you've got a few more extra minutes.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, Tandy? Online? Oh, Samsung. Oh, Tandy, question.
Hello.
Hi, Tandy. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I'm Tatenda from Simple Flying, currently based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I just wanted to touch a bit on one of the 6 pillars, which hasn't been talked about too much, which is aviation infrastructure. So, we obviously recognize some of the problems and challenges we face when traveling, across African airports, and obviously it differs from country to country. But we've seen a lot of cases where, governments invest in aircraft acquisitions and, reserve massive amounts of funds for state-owned airlines, and actually leave out that part of, developing aviation infrastructure. So I just wanted to know from your assessment, what do you think is stopping, some of these nations or governments from improving and actually developing efficient infrastructure for passenger processing? And, if this has any impact on like traffic and tourism in Africa, at what extent is that at?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So you're absolutely right. For some reason, infrastructure in Africa seems to be thought of last. Okay, and it's actually one of the hardest things to do because it takes time to do it. Okay, I think reason behind that is maybe the lack of knowledge and transparency. Okay, IATA does this quite well. It's been doing it for years, where we can step into a country, look at the aviation industry, and advise how to optimize the current airport, okay, for passenger flows and numbers, okay, and then assist in developing that airport, whether it is to expand or whatever the case may be, including cargo facilities and ramp handling and stuff like that. And that's why we included it into Focus Africa. That's a whole ball game on its own. But you're absolutely right. If you want to expand your aviation industry, then you need to be looking at the infrastructure, and down to fuelers and so on and so forth, and that has to go in line, or you're going to bottleneck your aviation industry, and it's so that's why we included it in the Focus Africa element. But you also have to reconsider the airspace itself also, and it's included in Focus Africa, where we look at optimizing the airspace for a number of reasons. One, to cope with the traffic and the growth, and number two, to make it more efficient. So less costly. Instead of burning an additional 10 minutes or 20 minutes of fuel every single flight from A to B, we will optimize that airspace so that we reduce that 10 minutes, which is wear and tear on engines and aircraft, plus burning fuel, and plus producing CO2. So overall, we've already considered this, and it's part of Focus Africa.
Great, thanks. Sorry, we're not going to have time for all the questions. Maybe we'll do last three. Yes, thanks.
Okay, Sir Kamil, today there is a proliferation of initiative being undertaken by IATA in relation to Africa Airline. Conversely, there are also parallel initiatives being taken by AFRA, which stands for Africa Association. Is there any platform of collaboration, or at least a converging of initiatives between both organizations? To put it simple, what is the state of collaboration between IATA and AFRA today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So AFRA represents the African airlines, okay, and IATA represents the African airlines plus the rest of the planet Earth airlines, right? So we do have an MOU that's signed with AFRA on the Focus Africa initiative, which is great, okay. We understand that AFRA is limited with resources, okay? So predominantly we have them involved with all our initiatives, and they will be engaged with us on every initiative that we trigger. And for example, CASF, if you see the CASF meeting, AFRA was there, okay? So we made sure that AFRA was there. We hope to utilize any of their subject matter experts in all of Focus Africa. But we are not moving 1 inch in Africa unless we have all the stakeholders with us. We don't intend to sort of hoard anything. We intend to actually involve all the stakeholders, including AFRA, AFCAC, the African Union, ASA. ASA has been fantastic with us. All the entities and stakeholders in Africa are already engaged with us.
Yeah, the fundamentals of Focus Africa is a collaborative approach. So that's what we're seeking to do, and AFRA are a key partner. Sorry, last two questions, Shola and then Karen.
Yeah, let me take you to Nigeria. Nigerian government is trying to review its bilateral air services agreements with over 100 foreign countries. What is the position of IATA on this?
IATA plays, so traditionally IATA plays very little in this particular part. So if you see the recent signature between Nigeria and Kuwait, I think 2 days ago in the ICANN in Riyadh, and I was there, by the way. So it is a normal state-to-state process. Yeah, there are always all these agreements between countries and countries. To me, it is quite complicated. I think very restrictive in many cases, all this paperwork and delegations and meetings and so on and so forth for what should be at some point down the road in the future. These BASAs, all these agreements and so on, I think will be washed out because it doesn't serve the purpose. But it is a complicated thing, and IATA generally doesn't get that involved with it.
But we are for increasing connectivity. We push for more. Sorry, just find the last question.
Yes.
Poor Kamil being gone for 2 hours.
Okay, yes, yes. Yeah, thank you for your time. I just want to ask, you did speak about safety, but what about security? Like, is IATA satisfied, for example, that African countries are investing enough in securing capabilities to fight threats to aviation, for example, like smuggling, illegal wildlife products, trafficking, things like that. So if you can just maybe say something on security.
Yeah, so when you look at smuggling and wildlife, that's an IATA core initiative. It's not even part of Focus Africa because it's in the DNA of IATA. So that's being handled whether it's Focus Africa or not. Okay. The security issue is initiative number 3. Okay, so there's 69 initiatives under the 6 columns. Initiative number 3 is security at airports. We want to initially start and set the standards between the 6 states, and then effectively grow into having these 16 states aligned and sharing data and so on and so forth with PNRs and so on. So it is a big part of Focus Africa. And of course, if it is part of Focus Africa, then you know that you can immediately tell, and the answer to your question is no, IATA is not quite satisfied at this particular moment with the level of security at the airports.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Kamil, any final closing words?
No, I'd like to thank everybody for attending, number one, okay. Number two, I think Africa has a really good future, and we understand that fully, okay. We are, so you know, AMI has 68 countries in this region. From the top onwards, and IATA, the instruction is to put a lot of focus in Africa in the next 4 or 5 years, with measurable improvements, and that's the intent. The team has been focused on Africa heavily 22 and 23, and will continue in the next 3 years, 4 years. Once we tick off an initiative, we're putting another initiative in its place, and we intend to do this in a collaborative manner with all the stakeholders. And I'm looking forward to seeing the results exactly this time next year to see how much we managed to achieve in Africa.
And we'll be holding another Focus Africa event in Africa this year as well, so we'll keep you all updated. So thank you, everybody. I know there was more questions. If you do have more questions, if you email myself, Haya, or Lyndon, and then we'll get back to you. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll speak again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.